Hello, brothers. Today, the theme is the sunset of Japan. Let's unveil the harsh truth behind Japan's inability to rise again. Some say Japan can rise again. Others say Japan is finished. Today, he will explain clearly why Japan is destined not to rise again. What cruel historical and geopolitical truths lie behind this? In 2023, a shocking news arrived: Germany's GDP surpassed Japan's. This pushed Japan off the throne of the world's third-largest economy. This was a resounding slap to Japan, once called an economic miracle. In the late 1980s, Japan's GDP reached over 60% of America's. Western media even predicted that Japan would surpass America. Now, over 30 years later, Japan has not surpassed America. Instead, it has been overtaken by Germany. It is likely to be pushed to fifth place by India in 2025. This drastic decline is no coincidence. Analyzing the logic behind this reveals a harsh fact. Japan's prosperity was merely a historical anomaly. As China returns to the center stage, Japan will inevitably return to its historical fate. The history of East Asia has an unchanging rule. When the Central Powers are strong, surrounding smaller nations will rise and fall. When the Central Powers decline, smaller nations have the chance to rise. This is not coincidence but a geopolitical law. Looking at Japan's historical rises, all occurred during periods of chaos or decline in China. During the Meiji Restoration, China was in a time of weakness. After World War II, Japan experienced rapid economic growth. This coincided with periods of chaos and isolation in China. The bubble economy of the 1980s occurred when China had just begun its reforms. Whenever China regained strength, Japan was inevitably suppressed. Like grass beside a large tree, when the tree flourishes, the grass cannot thrive. Japan's geopolitical dilemma also reflects in its diplomatic choices. Its identity is extremely awkward. To the east is a once-injured parent, China, which has now regained its vitality. To the west is a distant guardian, the United States, across the Pacific Ocean. The allies to the south are either far away in Australia or in Europe. To the north, Russia constantly disputes territory. This geopolitical environment prevents Japan from rising independently. The changing attitude of the United States towards Japan is another fatal blow. After World War II, the U.S. supported Japan to contain communism through the Marshall Plan. They opened markets and transferred technology, creating conditions for Japan's rise. However, once Japan's economy threatened the U.S. position, the U.S. quickly turned against it. The Plaza Accord in 1985 was the first harvest for the U.S. It forced the yen to appreciate significantly, creating a bubble that led to Japan's bankruptcy. When the bubble burst, the U.S. bought up Japanese assets. Since 2022, this scenario has replayed. The Federal Reserve's aggressive rate hikes from 0 to 5.5%, while Japan maintains near-zero interest rates. This large interest rate gap has caused massive capital flight from Japan. The yen has depreciated over 30% against the dollar. In this situation, Japanese companies face rising costs, but cannot raise prices, leading to dual pressure. By the end of 2023, over 3,000 Japanese companies had declared bankruptcy. More critically, Japan's proud manufacturing sector is being overtaken. 20 years ago, most electronic products were Japanese brands. Brands like Sony, Panasonic, and NEC dominated the market. Now, Japanese brands have nearly vanished from the global consumer electronics market. The data is alarming. In the semiconductor sector, Japan's market share fell from 50% to under 10%. In the TV market, brands like Sharp and Sony drop from 40% to under 15%. In the mobile market, brands like Sony and NEC have nearly exited. Even in the automobile industry, Japan is quickly being surpassed, with China becoming the world's top car exporter in 2023. This ended Japan's 50-year dominance. In electric vehicles, Japanese cars have been left far behind. Their market share is under 5%. Toyota's recent concerns are not unfounded. He stated that if Japan shifts to electric vehicles, the automotive industry will collapse, costing millions of jobs. An even more shocking phenomenon is that Japan's elite are leaving in large numbers for China. The most typical example is in the field of photocatalysis. Top international scientists. Toshihiro Fujishima, a multiple nominee for the Nobel Prize. The former president of Tokyo Institute of Technology brought his entire research team to Shanghai. Also, an authority in Japanese brain science, Shikiko Hirakawa, gave up generous treatment in Japan to work at the University of Tokyo. These are not isolated cases. According to statistics from Japan's Ministry of Education, in the past 5 years, over 3,000 senior researchers from Japan have come to work at the University of Tokyo. This includes 87 top scholars who are academicians of the Japan Academy. Why is this happening? The root cause lies in the drastic decline of research funding in Japan. Once a world leader, Japan's research funding is now less than 1/5 of that of the University of Tokyo. Aside from the University of Tokyo and a few other top institutions like Kyoto University, most universities in Japan can no longer support high-level research with their annual funding. An anonymous Japanese professor revealed that at the University of Tokyo, they can receive 5 times the research funding and 10 times the investment in laboratory equipment compared to Japan. The research environment here feels like returning to Japan's golden era of the 1980s. Many praise Japanese youth for their low-desire society, believing they transcend material constraints and pursue spiritual fulfillment. But is this really the case? Let's look at another set of data. Japanese youth aged 20 to 34 have an average monthly income of 180,000 yen, approximately 8,500 renminbi. The average rent in the 23 wards of Tokyo is 120,000 yen. This is about 5,700 renminbi per month. Average food expenditure is 50,000 yen per month, which is also about 5,700 renminbi. Let's do a quick calculation. Japanese youth find that after deducting rent and food, there's almost nothing left. This is not a conscious choice for a low-desire life. This is clearly a forced renunciation of desire. Even more sadly, many young people in Japan are starting to accept gig economy jobs just to maintain basic living standards. A statistic from Japan's Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare shows that over 40% of young people in Japan are simultaneously engaged in 2 or more jobs. Many of them work over 60 hours a week. Under this pressure, young people in Japan generally delay or give up on marriage. The latest survey from the Cabinet Office shows that 46.8% of unmarried men aged 18 to 34 feel they lack the financial means to marry. This has led to a continuous decline in Japan's birth rate, dropping to 1.26 in 2023. This is a record low. Despite facing many challenges, Japanese society remains relatively stable. There have been no large-scale social upheavals. This is hidden behind Japan's unique social structure. That is a high degree of class rigidity. Since the Asuka period, Japan has established a strict class system. Even after the Meiji Restoration and post-war reforms, the essence of this class rigidity has not changed. It has merely taken on a different form. Looking at Japan's political scene, the prime ministers from the interest groups generally come from political families. Shinzo Abe's grandfather was former Prime Minister Nobusa Kishi. His father was Foreign Minister Shintaro Abe. Shigeru Ishiba's father was a politician, Toshio Ishiba. Taro Aso is also closely related to the imperial family. Although this class rigidity limits social mobility, it also has an unexpected advantage. That is, social wealth does not fluctuate dramatically. The vested interests accumulate wealth, but they also bear the corresponding responsibilities. While ordinary people's lives are becoming increasingly difficult, their basic needs can still be met. This is why Japan's economy has stagnated without collapsing. Class rigidity has become a safety net for Japanese society, keeping it relatively stable amid a slow decline. Considering the above analysis, Japan's future development path is becoming clear. It cannot rise independently again, but it will not completely collapse. The most likely scenario is that Japan will gradually return to its historical position as an important member of the East Asian Civilization Circle. However, it may become the Switzerland of East Asia, maintaining certain economic and cultural influence, but politically and militarily dependent on major powers. In fact, this shift has already quietly begun. Although the Japanese government publicly emphasizes the Japan-US alliance, its economic ties with East Asia are becoming tighter. In 2023, East Asia became Japan's largest trading partner, with bilateral trade exceeding $380 billion. Among visitors to Japan, the proportion of East Asian tourists has increased from 14.8% in 2015 to 38.6% in 2023. The third point is Japan's direct investment in East Asia. Since 2018, it has seen 5 consecutive years of growth, accumulating over $15 billion. These data indicate that, no matter how political statements are made, Japan's economic lifeline increasingly relies on East Asia. Coupled with the unchangeable nature of its geographical position, Japan will ultimately return to its historical position. That is, it will become a part of the East Asian Civilization Circle, rather than a part of the Western system. Of course, this process will not be instantaneous, nor will it be without setbacks. However, the direction of history is already irreversible. One must recognize clearly that Japan's decline is not accidental. It is a return to historical norms. The rise of the East, America's harvest, the decline of industries, the loss of talent. These are all inevitable expressions of historical trends. Ultimately, it will return to the position history has assigned to it. That is, as a member of the East Asian Civilization Circle, rather than an independent world power. History will not simply repeat itself, but it always presses towards the same direction. Japan's future has already been marked by the wheel of history. And this direction is a return to the embrace of East Asian civilization. Finally, everyone is encouraged to like and follow Little Gyo-Mei's strategy. Such a complex revenge. Let me help you see clearly.